Today, I'm going to be reviewing the Sirui Saturn 50mm T2.9 anamorphic lens. Now, with a lens this small, this compact and lightweight, and this affordable for an anamorphic prime, just what kind of value are you getting out of this lens? Well, I'm going to be looking at all of that in today's video. And just a quick disclosure up front, Sirui did send me this lens for review, and I do get to keep it after making the video. But they don't get any input on the making of the video, my opinions, or even get to see it beforehand. So it's not like nothing of value changed hands with this review, but as always, I'm gonna do my best to remain fair and neutral with my opinions. So let's get into it. This lens has a maximum aperture of T2.9 and a squeeze factor of 1.6. And so what that means is that it is a 50mm lens, and you're gonna get a 50mm type of compression, but you're gonna have a 60% wider field of view compared to a standard spherical 50mm lens. For comparison, I used my DZO Vespid 50mm lens, which is a spherical lens and is going to give you a standard field of view that you would get from a 50mm lens. And you can see how much wider of a perspective this Sirui Saturn gives you by comparison. It comes in mirrorless mounts, it's full frame, and it's made of carbon fiber. So this lens is extremely lightweight, compact, and it's also pretty affordable. And then just a quick note on the aspect ratio. Because I'm shooting it with the Komodo X, and that sensor is a wide 17:9 sensor, doesn't have open gate. That is why this aspect ratio is so wide. And I could certainly use this for a creative effect if I wanted, but I could also just crop in and get a standard 2:4:1 widescreen aspect ratio as well. So what type of characteristics are you gonna get with this lens? Well, it's sharp, it's gonna have good pronounced oval bokeh in the background, and it's also free from any obvious distortions or overly pronounced anamorphic funk. A lot of times anamorphic lenses can be really soft when they're wide open, so it's hard to nail focus. They can be huge and cumbersome at times, and they can have vignetting or distortion that can be really distracting. I think this lens is a good balance between having some of the anamorphic characteristics that you are probably more familiar with and that you want, such as the oval bokeh in the background, the horizontal lens flares, and just a different type of fall off into the out of focus areas. And it's gonna have all of those characteristics that you want without having the significant distortions, vignetting, and just kind of cumbersome workflow that a large anamorphic lens can often come with and be prone to. As far as negatives go with the characteristics of this lens, there is a little bit of chromatic aberration that's present, but I don't think it's too pronounced. And in my opinion, the biggest negative of this lens is the fact that the minimum focus distance is 3 feet. And so you're not gonna have a very good minimum or close focus with this lens, and the fact that the perspective of the lens is so much wider than you would be used to on a standard spherical 50mm, you might have sort of a tendency to move closer than 3 feet to get that close-up, but you're just not going to be able to get it with this lens. To me, the most interesting characteristic of this lens is the fact that it does have a 1.6 times squeeze factor. The thing that I appreciate and have noticed with using such a wide perspective with anamorphic is the fact that when you have, let's say, a close-up shot that you shoot with a standard 50 that is a spherical lens, you can get a standard close-up where your subject, in this case it's me taking a photo, is going to be very separated from the background. The background's out of focus, and it is just me that is present and noticeable in the frame. But if you take the same exact shot, the same exact framing, same exact distance from the camera, and you throw this 50mm lens on it, because it has a 60% wider field of view, now all of a sudden that same close-up shot is gonna have a completely different feel to it. Now, I'm the same distance from the camera, and the background is kind of similarly blurred and compressed, but because you can see so much more of the environment, so much more of the world that I'm in, I think it really does kind of add to that larger than life feel that an anamorphic lens can bring. Now, obviously the distinguishable lens flares and the oval bokeh and the focus fall off is very unique to cinema. And so it can add, if you want to call it cinematic, it adds kind of that quality and characteristic to it. But to me, the bigger thing, and it's maybe a little bit less obvious, but I think has a bigger impact than just the lens flares and the shape of the bokeh, is the fact that this wider aspect ratio makes the background and the environment that you're filming in more present in the frame. One sort of criticism that I've heard about this lens is that it does feel very clean, and oftentimes the word clinical can get thrown around. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that it is like overly clinical in the sense that it's sterile, but it is a clean, neutral lens as far as anamorphics go. Now, I think that this, in my opinion, is a good thing, especially for the type of user that it's marketed towards. With this lens being under $1,000, it's going to be a more affordable budget option as far as anamorphics go. Now, this is probably not a lens that people are going to rent super often, because I think if you're renting an anamorphic lens, you're probably renting for a specific look, and you're probably willing to go with a more expensive lens because you're saving money on the rental. So people that are looking to own an affordable either single lens or set of lenses, in my opinion, are more often than not going to want something that has some very distinct anamorphic characteristics, like the oval bokeh, the horizontal lens flares, and that kind of unique fall off that an anamorphic lens has in the out of focus areas. And this lens has all of those characteristics, but it does not have some of the other characteristics that can oftentimes be more distracting and, in my opinion, limiting depending on your use case. It doesn't have, like we've talked about, a really pronounced and obvious distortion, barrel or pin cushion, and it doesn't have vignetting, and it is pretty just sharp overall. Now, you can change distortion in post, you can change sharpness either through filtration or in post as well. You can add vignetting and other characteristics in post, but it's going to be much harder to add a good anamorphic type lens flare in post in a way that is efficient and looks good. And it's also going to be really hard to manipulate the bokeh and the fall off in the out of focus areas to have a very distinct anamorphic look. If you are looking for an anamorphic lens and that is something that you want to add to your kit, I think that this is definitely worth considering, because it is, I think, a good, clean, neutral palette to work from. And the fact that it's so small and compact is going to mean that you can take it more places and use it more often. Now, this lens is about $1,000, and it's generally on sale for, somewhere in the $600 to $800 range. So I think for that price point, you are absolutely getting a ton of value. And I can see a lot of people who are working on a short film or are doing, kind of commercial or spec work or YouTube work where they want a more stylized look with anamorphic. And so having something that can give you that very distinct, unique look that you can't get from a spherical lens at the price of less than a standard prime lens is a really interesting option. And I don't think too many people are going to be upset if they're, wanting an anamorphic look. You're definitely going to get it, and you're going to get it at a relatively affordable price.